P.S. I know it's Murphy's Law, but I do happen to have my phone on just in case my bed gets delivered while we're doing this. It was sort of... It was supposed to be sort of yesterday and today, but you know how they are. You know, we'll show up between 9 and 9 on Monday to Friday. You know,
yeah, fair. Forewarning. I called the cops about an hour ago because there was gunshots like a block away. So if they show up to the door, that's my
Portland. Picking off, man.
Yeah. Oh, and
wow.
And my high school has another sex scandal with teachers and students. So there's the tea.
Are you disappointed you weren't involved?
I mean, no.
Welcome if you're joining us for the first time. This is the Professional Misfits. We recover these sides of professional life. Broedy, roll those credits.
You got it.
From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your Professional Misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I am your host, Christopher Sellers.
And from Portland, Oregon, I'm Broedy Ipox.
And we are your Professional Misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And it's episode 62, Misfits, season 6, episode 62. Today, we're talking about online relationships. Do they work? Question mark. We're going to get into it. Broedy, do you have a quick overview of today's episodes? Any hot facts, questions, anything that you want to get off your chest straight away to let the Misfits know?
Yeah, right off the rip, Misfits, if we're talking online relationships, we're talking text communication, emojis fucking matter, okay? Emojis fucking matter. All right.
There we go. But before we dive into all the hot and spicy content, quick shout out to IGU, sponsor of this season and last season. I've got to find the promo. Here we go. I'm so professional. Nick must love me. Hang on, I got to find the promo. What does it say? What's the app
he only
you're
did
working
it
on?
10 times last season as well.
Right? I did all sorts of variants last season as well. You got an ASMR version, you got a horror version, and now it's just, oh, fuck, what are we being paid to say? Right, so, brought to you by IGU. It's an old game with a new twist where modern innovation and nostalgia come together to bring you Tag of Today. And it's live, Misfits, so you can get on Google Play, you can get on the Apple Store, you can download the app and play with everyone else. What, a couple of 100,000? Or have how many? Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of downloads.
Yeah, in the pre-registrations, we had over 200,000, so it's converting pretty quickly. And jump in and claim your spot on the leaderboard because that's already getting pretty competitive as well. So.
For real, I love it. A good. I'm competitive. Anyway,
download it, Chris. Damn it, we're sponsored.
Is it live in Oz?
Yes, it is.
Ooh.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Oh, I'll have to jump in. Yeah. All right. So, online relationships, Misfits. Do they work? This can be online dating. That's probably what we'll mostly talk about. We'll probably briefly touch on like even work relationships because spoilers, technically, Broedy, this is an online relationship, my man. You and I, we've never met in real life, Misfits. We're in two different countries, in different hemispheres, all sorts of weird time zones.
And we've gotten comments from you guys. And because of Chris, I'm convinced because of Chris, it's a 50-50 split of people that think we should meet up and people that think we shouldn't.
And I'm actually in the never meet up camp.
Yep, he's going to run away. He's going to hide every time.
Maintain the mystery. The spice of there's a whole gimmick. I think if we ever met up, it'd just like be over. Like no one would ever watch. But here we go, Misfits. So what's your hot take on whether online relationships, do they work? Do they not work? Broedy, do you want your initial opinion when I say online relationship, what's your first impulse? What do you immediately jump to?
I'm going to be a nerd here, but like for me, immediate knee jerk reaction, I think of all of my gaming buddies. That like it just
Okay, yeah,
immediately, I
fair,
just
fair,
go,
fair.
I go right to the squad, and that kind of little bromance kind of like thing.
Oh, that's right, because you're a WoW kid as well.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. So, yeah, um, yeah, that's where my head goes. But I really am excited about this episode because and way to bring it up right off the rip. There's so many different facets of online relationships,
Hmm,
long
hmm,
distance relationships. There's so many
hmm.
variants and like in even like you said, not just romantically misfits. Like for instance, two of my best friends in the whole world, Chris and Andrew, that Andrew lives in Texas and Chris lives in Australia. Okay. So, those are huge distances between me.
Mm.
And those are some of the most important relationships in my life too. So,
Aw.
it doesn't just have to be the girl you swipe right on. You know what I mean? But yes,
Well,
I
I'll
do
start.
imagine we'll talk about that a lot as
Yeah, yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so then I guess I'll start backwards because this is one of my last notes to bring up rather than jumping into stats because stats are so sexy. I know how stats pop an audience. But what's the why behind online relationships? That's what I'm interested in. Like, internet burst onto the scene before all the apps and swiping left and right.
Um,
You were hanging out
I hate to
in.
interrupt, Misfits. If I do die tonight, I apologize. That was another gunshot. Oh my
Oh,
god!
really?
What?
Wow.
It's yeah, it's either a gunshot or some dumbass kid putting fireworks on somebody's doorstep. But it sounds a lot like a round to me. Sorry, Chris. I did
Interesting.
not
No, no,
not mean
no,
to
no, no.
interrupt.
That's all
My
right.
dog
Just
too was like, "You
live.
hear that?"
No,
Shit.
random, random. But listen, bro. Gunshots aside, stay on point. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking
Okay.
about.
I got you. I got you.
We're talking about hashtag American problems. So, all right, online. Because, like I said, before apps, you were hanging out in chat rooms. It's
Mhm,
like it's the
mhm.
minute the
AOL
internet.
Messenger.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Omegle, all of
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Yeah.
The minute online entered the scene, like people were looking at ways to hook up or connect or communicate or
Right.
forums, live journal like predated Facebook, and I had
Mhm,
a whole bunch of
mhm.
friends and an ex on that,
Yeah. Blogs and forums,
so
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So it's not new. Like you can't just wave your finger at the kids today and say socials is bad, because it seems like the appetite's always been there. So what is it,
Interesting. Okay.
right? I always seem to take this vein of like it's not the tool, it's us using the tool, like our purpose behind it, right?
But I think that's a
So
perspective that probably gets neglected in today's day and age, where just like you said, I think a lot of the blame is on the kids of today, and
well,
their inability to have relationships and blah blah blah. And it's like, bro, I mean, just like you said, motherfucker, you had dinner with your wife and went signed into AOL and talked to
yeah.
fuck God knows who, like fuck off.
ASL, just spam it. We'll get into that a little bit later because I did research and I've got sexy stats on this piece of paper. But that's like what, like, okay, so why do we seek out online relationships? Is it as simple as can't find what I want like immediately in the immediate pool, so you reach for another resource? Is it that simple?
I don't. No, I don't think it's that simple. I think it does have a ton to do with human connection. Now, I don't want to get too philosophical right off the rip, but I just think, and you stated this in a different way than I'm about to. Like, it's always been there, right? Like,
Mm.
we're not necessarily the greatest at relationships. I don't know if you guys have caught on to that, but when we look at it justifiably, statistically, we're pretty shit. Like, we're pretty shit. So
You
I
mean people
think
in general?
people in general, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and and it's kind of the same thing that I look at with this kind of new fad or the online relationship or this trend is like, it's the same thing. You're looking kind of to facilitate a need or a desire that's not being filled, right? Like in your present and real life. Like, and I know that from past experiences, you know, shit. I've had fall downs in relationships where I've had online relationships to boot, so emotional cheating and that kind of thing. And it's just, I know that from my own experience now, looking back at it, that I was just trying to fill a need. I was trying to fix something that was, you know, damaged or broken in a way that was not actually fixing what was damaged, broken, you know. And I think human beings do that a lot. So I kind of think that's the issue that we're looking at now, is like, it's the human issue, but it's exacerbated because it's now put online and people can share and see and talk about all these different things. And it's information moves quick, you know.
Because you had a few notes that you wanted to get through. So what was on your list of hot topics?
Nicole, lay down. Jesus, this was a terrible idea. Let me pull that up. That is right here. Cover my face with it. I'm being professional. I swear, Misfits.
It's okay.
Okay. So, a study of the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that people in long distance and online relationships report higher levels of loneliness compared to those in geographically closer relationships. Aha, you know, amazing fucking astounding fact. But I wanted to highlight that one because I thought it was interesting, because again, this is what I was talking about, right? Like, we're looking to fill something, and generally speaking, that's connection. But then you find online connection and you don't feel connected. And it's like, what the fuck are we redundantly creating this cycle for?
Hang on though. So here's where I kind of raise my disclaimer sort of banner.
Okay. Yes.
Or behave contrary just to prove a point. So the first question I think I asked you was, do you have any online relationships? And then you cite the boys. And then at the same time, you raise this stat because this is specifically romantic relations. So do you feel that research and that study is applicable to you and the lads playing WoW online?
I do. And the reason that I can connect these two. Yes. So the reason that I can connect these two, and this is why I brought it up, is so again, I think the reason that you know, it's so obvious that we're pointing out geographically close relationships as opposed to these is because again, even though at the end of a night out with my mates, we're drinking, we've gone to the gym, whatever it might be, I know they're right down the road. And it's
okay.
And it's an interesting thing because even with the boys, and especially some that I play with pretty often, you know, and pretty consistently, there are giant periods of time. Like, I haven't played World of Warcraft for 2 weeks. So I almost all of the guys that I play with, I haven't spoken with for 2 weeks. And again, we are connected. And if they messaged me on Discord or, you know, reached out or said, where the hell are, I'd be right there. That's not the issue. It's just, again, that proximity matters, right? You know, like if I'm not going to see you down the street, out of sight, out of mind. And that's not because you, again, because you don't matter. It's because in this moment, I have things that take priority because they are here. They're not, you know, it's not 1,000 miles away. So that's why I brought it up. I do think so. I do. I think the boys get off and they set their headsets down, and it's also kind of like the relation that I would make is like to World of Warcraft or The Sims or, you know, any real simulation kind of game where you get in and you are role playing or taking the characteristic of a leader or whatever it is, and then you snap into your primary role, your in real life role, and it's not the same role that you were just playing. And that shit, that's hard. And I know it's hard for a lot of people that can't identify what's happening. You know, they don't even realize that that's what's going on for them. So yeah, that was I'm glad you brought that up that way, because I was full circle trying to connect those two pieces. And again, I have some of the best relationships that I've ever had. But even in times where you and me are into heavy production or we've got things going on professionally, we don't talk until pre-production.
True.
That's it, you know what I mean? And again, it's not because neither of us don't matter to the other. It's just life takes precedent. You know? That's kind of a lonely, kind of stark realization when you're in those relationships, you know?
It is. I think you've actually started to tug on a thread of where this conversation is going to go. It's like online relationships are probably a great starting point, and they're probably great for introductions and a great starting point.
Right.
But if you sort of keep pulling on this thread and understanding connection and then intimacy and then what human connection is and social connection and all of that, even sexual romantic connection, you realize if you tug that string all the way to the end, like you're going to want to desire that in real life experience and intimacy and connection.
Yep,
and
with
so
that individual. It's not even just striving for that connection. It's like we found it. It's like for me.
And so how long is that piece of string? You know what I mean? How long can you sort of tease out, get to know someone, develop trust, talk about all your secret wants and desires and, you know, nightmares before, you know, until you can no longer be satisfied by that and you need the actual human connection. Just chew on that for a minute, because here's some funny stats. Here's some interesting stats that I pulled up. Okay. So you sort of asked the question, like, online relationships, do they work? Quick searchy of like, well, how many people meet online these days, whether online or on an app? And the stats across US and Oz are comparable, actually. Okay. So
interesting.
And this is, again, like people who confess to, yes, I use apps, or yes, I've met someone, right?
Right. We've talked about this in the past episode.
Yeah, because everyone on Ashley Madison is like, no, I'd never been online. So apparently about 30% of people who have met online or met someone. Huge. But hang on, but wait, okay, right?
Okay.
And this is across like US and Australia. About 30% of people will admit to, yes, I've met someone or have gone on a date or, you know, have used that as a means of interaction, right? Now, this is where it gets interesting, because that might be a large percentage, but it's actually broken down by demographic, right? So for people under 44, it's about 24% of them will say, yes, we meet people online, we date online, we do all this sort of stuff. Okay. If you're over 44, that usage drops off a cliff and it's about 6%. Right?
Damn.
Right. So you might have like a third of people admitting, or, you know, a sample saying, yes, we meet online, but they will predominantly be under 40. Right? Now, so that's one thing to consider. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I dug a little bit deeper and I found some research from the Pew Institute, PEW. They did a bit of research on this. Now, this is, even though 33% of people might meet online, it's like 1 in 10 adults who are in a committed, like, long-term relationship and who are living together, right? So have actually made that commitment, blah, 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 blah. They admit, like, we met online, right? So only, even though 33% of people under 40, you know, well, let's say, okay, 24% of people under 40 are using apps and online mediums, right? Only 1 in 10 eventuate to a long-term stable relationship. Those are just like two random bits of information for you to consider, because it's all take into account also that a lot of people they're partnering off less, they're partnering off later, fewer having children, or the rise of poly relationships and all this sort of shit. So there's a lot of external context to consider, but when it comes to everyone's on dating apps and everyone's hooking up everywhere all the time, that the stats disprove that notion, as well as everything else we've talked about in other episodes and in other series, right? So Broedy, you're sort of shaking your head in disbelief. What's going on? I think your mic's off, bro. Oh, sick. Oh no. Did you mute yourself, or is it? Is that mute? Janet, you're on mute. All right, so you were in shock. You were in shock.
Yeah. So the 30%. I mean, I that seems large to me. Even 24%. That's a quarter of the people that were asked. Like that's crazy. I didn't expect you to take it a layer further. And the 1 in 10. That's kind of disappointing. I mean, Jesus.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Wow. Like, okay.
Yeah, even I didn't expect that.
No. And then, for the age difference, the things that I want to highlight. So I wonder if in 20 years you took the same test, what those numbers would look like, right? Because it would obviously be different, grafted with people that were born or, have grown around technology.
Put a pin in that because I have a theory. Go on. Yes.
Okay. And then kind of cycling back to the 30%, I'm with you in the sense that that's large, but I think it's probably way bigger because I think I think you said it well. I think there's a lot of fucking people. And I'm not just talking about negative relationships. I'm not talking about the Ashley Madison stuff. I'm talking about even people that have just in passing kind of connected with someone online, and that might be a more disconnected friendship, but it's still a relationship. And I don't think a lot of people take those into account when we're talking about this. And I think that's completely valid because, again, you look at the acquaintance down the street or the guy that you enjoy running into at the bar or whatever, you would tell someone that he's your friend. You would tell someone that you guys have a relationship. That's the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So number one, I think that number is wrong. And number two, 10 years from now, I think you're looking at a completely different study where 40 and up. And look, I'll say this, even further down the road, I think you would see the problem we were talking about earlier, where people kind of use this medium and then leave it. It's not a serious place to gain that relationship. That problem's just going to be exacerbated. I see that happening.
Right. So here's my theory, and I think I disagree, and I'm going to explain why. Okay. So let's say the last 10 years, apps became like a thing, the hot new shiny toy to meet. Well, again, for context, I had a quick research into like, why do people opt for online dating as opposed to fucking join a social group or go to a gym or like read a book or anything, and the kind of the three biggest ones was, number one, it's private. I can do it on my phone. I can do it at home. I can search anyone and anything and all that sort of stuff. So number one, it's private. Okay. Number two, you have a sense of control over whom and how. You can sort of vet a little bit, especially for women. Another stat from the Pew, another stat from the Pew Institute was at least roughly half of women surveyed felt that online dating was unsafe. So because you don't know, you don't know who you're going to, for all these sort of reasons, so that you still get a little bit of a buffer there to vet, to have a video call, to have a phone call, hear the sound of their voice, all those sorts of things. We have a bit more control over it. And the third point they made was like, apparently, it gives you the perspective that you have access to a larger pool of potential dates. Right.
See, that sucks to me though. Like I don't want that larger number.
Sure. So, but here's why And here's why I'm going to disagree with your theory, because I think in the nicest possible way, COVID fucked us, and it exposed the apps for what they were, right? So the apps were hot before COVID. COVID comes along, we all go into lockdown, we have nothing we only have online relationships, right? Personally, professionally, we only have online relationships. We're all climbing the walls. We want human connection. We want this sort of intimacy. And I think the apps in general and just the experience, we all got burned using it. Like it's shit. People lie. They're desperate for connection. All these sorts of things. I think apps have run their course. I think people have had enough. We've hit the tipping point, and we're starting to move back to in-person relationships. Especially when, I know you're shaking your head, but especially when only 1 in 10, of these end up in a committed long-term relationship, which arguably most users are looking for. If you're looking for a quick hookup, great. Like, go to the club, go anywhere. Like, that's reasonably easy to find, right? But if you want a long-term, sort of connection or relationship with anyone, eventually it's going to have to come like in person. So so to your point, like 10 years from now, you'll probably see the age range like higher, like more usage of people, adopting it in their maybe 40s, 50s,
That's
and 60s.
A given.
Yep. I accept that, because if you're in your 20s and 30s now, you're used to apps and being online. So that's just going to be a natural thing progressing moving forward. However, I would be really, really surprised if that 1 in 10 statistic changed. That's sort of my point.
Yeah, no, and I don't want to back and forth. I love when we get in these little exchanges, but I just think, coming from the perspective of a parent and watching this generation that's coming up, I mean, it could go either way. I think you raise a valid path that it could all take, but I genuinely, again, I think the problem in totality is that kids in the younger generation, my kids, my sons, are being raised in that world where it is primarily digital. Even when they go and hang out with friends at school, they come home and it's on the game, or it's on Snapchat, or it's on the phone.
Yeah.
They don't hang out as often as I did when I was a kid. They don't go out and play just to play as often as I did as a kid. And as much as I agree with you that I think people in our age range can see it for what it is and are starved of it, I think trying to convince a child whose entire life has been that is going to be a harder sell.
All right. Yes, but no. Because again, like kids are sort of socially brighter than we tend to give them credit for. And if you look at apps in isolation, I can kind of see where you're coming from. But at the same time, the teen demographic that Facebook was once pitched to has died and dropped off a cliff. And no teenagers are adopting Facebook now. Why? Because they're savvy to the game. They know cyberbullying is a thing. They know stalkers and all this sort of shit is a thing. So that's something that we've been through, like, trial by fire, and realized, holy shit, like anyone can find me, anyone can find my family, they can get access to too much, right? So there's that sort of risk, but also just the fact that we all know that you're stealing all of my information, all of my data for all of the things all of the time. So fuck you. So you have, Facebook's adoption has all but stalled. Right?
Truly. And I don't know the exact statistic, but I did see that the other day.
Right. So especially for youth, right? Especially for youth, which is your target demographic. So
almost non-existent.
Right. So you can observe that and go, great. Like if they're avoiding Facebook for all of these reasons, do you really think, they're going to be jumping on like all the dating apps and all this sort of shit, you know, and I again, like I would reason not. And hopefully like parents like of you and your gen who have been through, again, the trial by fire that was social media and all this sort of shit, will educate your kids. Like Tom, who I work at the cafe on the weekends, his 15-year-old daughter is working with us on weekends, which is really, really cool. What I didn't know, a little insight to Tom's parenting, is that he's got his daughter's 15. I think his son is 13. It's like when they go to bed, it's like, cool, thanks, phones. And like they take their phones overnight and they get them back in the morning and all this sort of stuff. So they've got a whole bunch of protocols around social media use, for instance. Now, again, that didn't exist when we were kids. Like we were just being thrown into the deep end of like, what's this thing? Oh, these are these apps. I can talk to anyone anywhere in the world, you know?
Oh, that's cool. Nice.
Right. But again, like society isn't ignorant. You know, like tech bros love to wave the shiny thing and go, this is what it's going to be, and apps are going to change the future, and you can meet anyone, and holy fuck, and like, give us all the information. And then you've got parents who have been through this and like, yeah, maybe not. How do you know, we've been through a solid decade of catfishing. So,
I know, but it's almost like I'd like to make the analogy here that you make with tools, right? Like, and I'd almost argue that parenting, right? Like even it by example or by teaching, right? Like is very similar to that. Like I can present the tool, but if they don't use it, there is almost nothing I can do. There's so for instance, same thing. I bust my ass. I'm probably 5 pounds away from a shredded 6-pack. None of my kids are that way. It hasn't bred fucking Spartan warriors, you know, and I wish, you know what I mean? I wish. And same thing with this. Same thing with this, where it's like, you know, I can, yes, you're right. It is my role and my responsibility to approach those things and give them the best information that I can so they can make those decisions without the trial by fire. Right. But again, as fucking human beings and as dumbass kids, they just want the fire. They want the fire.
Sometimes, like there were,
you're right. Yes,
you know, and all of us will have moments of like wanting to like experimentation, you know, and wanting to taste the other side and all this sort of stuff. Now, I know we're kind of punishing apps for a little bit for probably all the right reasons, but here's another fun stat, and this is something that I find particularly interesting and it's worth talking about, is do online relationships work, you know, online dating and apps and all these sorts of things. One of the higher rates of adoption with a higher rate of long-term success, regardless of age, is actually within the queer community. So LGBTQ, right? And if you think about it, and there are some specific apps that are specifically for the queer community. And if you know me, you know,
kind of like layers of safety that you had mentioned earlier.
Well,
I could only imagine that it has to play a little part.
Well, there's two disclaimers here. Number one is, if you know me, if you've listened to any of the previous episodes, you know I'm using queer in a loving way because I have an arts background, and this is where all my friends just go, we're queer. Great.
Yep.
Rather than
it's politically accurate here, just so you know. Like for a while, it was not a great word, but now you hear most of the LGBT. Oh my god! I'm gonna fuck that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why my friends is like, we're queer, or like my other friend is like, I'm gay. I'm gay.
Exactly. They're like, dude.
Right.
Most of us are not like that. You know?
So partly it might have something to do with, you know, privacy, safety, and all these sorts of things. But also, if you think about it, you know, in just everyday life, it would be kind of hard to tell if this person, that person, are necessarily into what you're into. So these platforms, these forums, like private apps, give you a window, give a community, a safe gateway,
right?
You know, to, rather than just going to like the club on Oxford Street, to suss out and date the same way anyone else would date. you know, but just specifically within their niche and their community. And this is where online, this is one of the benefits, I suppose, of any sort of online relationship, and even has parallels to the World of Warcraft bros. Because if you have niche interests, whether they're personal, professional, sexual, hobby like, whatever, if you have niche interests, it's very, very difficult to immediately find other people with the same niche interests as you, unless there's some sort of central platform like an online blog or a website or a forum or an app that you can go to, that you would be able to go there and then share in those interests with other people.
It's very interesting to hear you vouch and kind of be the devil's advocate for these platforms and things, when I could go back to an earlier episode and you were ready to burn all this shit to the ground.
Yeah, for real. Don't worry, you know, this is like the 1 or 2% of apps, but even then, you know, or like, well, the ideal of these sorts of apps, right? And even within these apps, you still get swamped with like fucking idiots and trolls and like everything. It comes with all the problems with any sort of anonymous online community. The minute you make anything anonymous,
that's one thing that
brings out the worst in people.
That I did want to talk about, and you're bringing it up here,
right.
is okay. Look, in Misfits, don't get me wrong. I haven't swiped right. You know, like I have never actually been on a dating app and participated. So I can't say. But look.
Full legal disclaimer, Tiff.
Right. But look, hear me out. And I hear this a fucking shit. I mean, we all do, right? Like they go, oh yeah, the dating pool on those apps is fucking shit. Everybody's stupid. Everybody sucks. Everybody's weird. Everybody's fat. Blah blah blah. Okay, that's the fucking world, folks. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm not. But you take a strong, real, focused look around, and truly, the amount of people that would actually fit the caliber of partner that you're looking for, very fucking small. It's very fucking small for a good majority of people. And it's not an easy thing to just go out and find somebody, regardless if it's on an app or if it's in person. It's like what you said earlier, and I like this take. It's what you choose to do, right? Like if it is online dating, that gives me the safety, that gives me the security, that gives me the control, fine. That's fine. Don't act like the fucking cesspool of human fucking people on there are not also in the fucking world. Like,
right.
You know?
And I guess that highlights part of the problem. If if we're talking about online relationships being that sort of introductory string, and the more that you pull the string, you've got to get there in person eventually, right? Because it's tied to someone at the other end. Is if you invest all of your energy and dating efforts into apps, like the problem is you. You know what I mean? Like if it's not,
I didn't want to say that.
Right? Because if you were, I mean, to take a really crude analogy, like if you were investing, you would diversify your portfolio to give yourself as many chances as possible, right? So have 1 or 2 apps, like sure, whatever else you want to do on there, but like, do you have any other social settings or any other means of meeting, and maybe even outside of work, means of meeting someone interesting or attractive, or that you'd consider, taking a dinner?
Misfits, we know we've stated even in this episode, COVID fucked us up. We got it. We got it. But I think Chris also highlighted in this episode that we're all starved for that connection. So like he's talking about, if there's anything you can do, I'm not talking about going to the club. I'm not talking about going to the bar. And I don't think Chris is either. I'm talking about going to a bookstore, right? Like going to a coffee shop, going on a walk on a populous boardwalk, whatever it may be, that you might potentially have that swipe right running in real life, go do it. Just go do it. Yes, it's intimidating. Yes, it's scary. I imagine that meeting the person that you swipe right on is just the same. It's
I,
probably just as intimidating.
I'll tell you what. Again, yeah, but okay. Now, but picture this instead, right? Let's say, use the bookshop analogy. Let's say
Okay.
you go to the bookstore. Let's go
Mm-hmm.
to the bookstore. Now, imagine that you go cruising for, I don't know, real crime, fucking books, or like whatever it is that you're into, right? And then as you're cruising the aisles, all of a sudden you see someone cute, and they've got their hand on a book that you're really into.
Mm-hmm.
Like, isn't that more exciting, more interesting, more attractive than an
And
Insta
more,
photo?
and I know it's ridiculous to say this, but it's more real. Like I again,
Yeah.
so it's like let's take that same analogy. So you're on an app and you swipe right and you see a guy, and everything that he's got going on is he loves bookshops and he reads all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time and all this and all that shit. That's not, again, anywhere near, I can only imagine, not anywhere near as exciting as, again, being in the environment, being in the opportunity, being in the actual moment, seeing someone for who they are. Like, that's the whole thing for me, that I think, even with the content I produce, right? Like, even with the things that I've made on a personal level, one of the things that I hate, because of how much I enjoy being authentic, is how much I filter who that is in my
Yeah,
content.
right.
And I don't even intentionally do so. I think, again, it's kind of a subconscious thing that a lot of us do.
Oh, we all do it. It's a human. It is. You're different at work than you are at home, than you are with your family. It's the same thing
I
online.
hate it. I hate it. I hate
Well,
it.
no, but don't, because it's humane. It's sane, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's a little bit. It's a little bit. I mean, obviously, there's degrees when it comes to online, but when you come home from work and you've had a shit day, and your partner's home, like, you kick your shoes off, you take your pants off, and you're like, fuck. Fucking hate Johnny. Like, you want to vent, you want to rant, and like whatever, and like whatever else, and then you might slap your girl on the ass and go, "What's going on?" Make a bro feel better, And yes, no, maybe so, and that plays out however it plays out. You wouldn't do that with your family, right?
Right, right, right,
Right. That's the
right.
point. Is that these personas and filters are normal. Number one, but we can all see how they're blown out of proportion, or like censored heavily to appeal to an audience online, right? And yeah, it's, look, again, to bring it back to dating apps, really fucking, really, really frustrating and difficult if you're presenting yourself, guy or girl, as, hey, this is who I am, this is all, authentically where I'm at, this is what I'm into, and it kind of seems boring to you, talking about yourself in third person, and all this sort of shit, to put onto a profile that's in the void somewhere, hoping that you stand out. And
Hmm.
that's tough, man, because I think the one thing that the a major reason why I will, like, install an app and then fucking delete it within a week is not so much it's not so much the trash, but the absolute silence.
Mhm.
Is to open a little portal that is supposed to validate, your self-esteem in some respect, and have, like, nothing there. And you go, oh, I must be ugly and boring. Like, that's what the app is telling me. And then if that's your experience, it's the same. It's the same sort of symptoms every time you post on socials and you don't get as many likes or comments as you want, and whatever. And it's like, I'm not loved enough. The spotlight isn't bright enough. I'm not enough. Um, and that's one of the darker sides of all of social media, is it has that sort of
Oh, it's
parasocial.
it's evil,
Yeah.
man. Shit,
Hmm.
that fucking that fight,
But
that
again,
validation. Yeah.
the responsibility is mine. Like, I can either put up with this and go, wow, I
Yes.
can keep the app. I can keep the app that tells me I'm ugly, boring, and stupid, or I can delete it,
Mhm.
not use it, and, like, go for a walk,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
choose something healthier, or not rely on it so heavily, these sorts of things. Um, Yeah. What else is on your list, bro? What else is on your list?
That was interesting. I like that. I like that little rabbit hole. Okay, according to a study published in Cyber Psychology, Behavior, and Social Networking, individuals in online relationships tend to report similar or even higher relationship satisfaction than those in offline relationships due to the time spent communicating and the emotional support we tend to feel in those relationships. I want to talk about that for a second because this cycles back to the boys. This cycles back to those relationships. One of the things that I want to say here, though, is it's yes, I agree with this study. I think I can have a better line of communication with my boys, that I can shut that line of communication off. I don't necessarily think that's the actual embodiment of trust and communication. So I think this is kind of a double-edged sword here, where it's like, yes, you report those feelings, right? And you report that trust and that emotional support because, granted, it is there. But again, almost in the same deficit, out of sight, out of mind, you are at some point or another left to your own devices. And that's, it's hard. You know what I mean?
So if I'm understanding you in the study correctly, there is an element of I've set this time aside and I can connect with whomever and however on my terms, on my schedule, how I want to, and then turn it off.
Yep.
Right. But there's nothing outside of that.
Nope.
Which is both, I get, like a positive and a negative, right? I mean,
yeah. And
interesting.
Yeah. And so the reason that I wanted to bring this up too is because I think for a lot of the misfits, and I'm going to make this a little more broad than, you know, a direct relationship. So even for the misfits tuning in and listening to us, right? Like you may listen to these conversations, and you may, during some of these, even feel emotionally supported by Chris or I's opinion, or the things that we're saying that help you get clarity, or whatever the fuck it might be, right? But when the video's over, the video's over, you know. Chris and I are no longer there, you know. Like it's again, to go back to that stark realization. I wonder how many people, again, that claim this communication, this emotional support, also have an awareness of the fact that when it's not there, like you said, it's not there. That communication and that emotional support that you're willing to give to that space isn't necessarily transferable for a lot of people. It's almost too separate of a world, you know what I mean? And I want to tell the misfits that truly, in my own experience, it doesn't have to be that way. Just like I had mentioned with, you know, whether it's Chris or Andrew or even my partner Nick or whatever, you know, whoever, and we don't have days of talking, there's not a single point in time, and this has taken some training. This has really taken some training, misfits. There's not a single point in time, though, where I go or I'll let an intrusive thought come across my brain that is, they don't want to talk to me. They wouldn't be there if I reached out. I know all of you guys would, without a shadow of doubt in my mind. I know that. So that's where I find that I've strengthened that kind of break in those two sides of the sword. But I feel like a lot of people haven't, you know what I mean? And yeah, I know that's that can be a very sad place to be, because again, it's that internal dialogue and comparison we were talking about. You just beat the shit out of yourself. You go, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm boring, this person doesn't like me, they don't want to talk to me, they don't care. If I had something going on, it wouldn't matter. And that's all just a fucking fallacy. You know what I mean? Like, you're making that shit up. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's like it is. It's okay, and this is why the social dynamics is interesting, because you're partly right. Yes, we're making that up. But there's also a grain of truth in this as well, because the social feedback is is either silence or disconnect or disinterest or whatever. Like, that's the social feedback. Now we're all unfortunately, humans are all social creatures. You know, if you walk into a room and there's applause, you feel good and you feel special. You know, if you post something and it gets all the likes and all the comments from people that you respect and that you like, you're like, oh fuck, validated. I am smart. Like it does. I am worthy. You know, and the same, we import the same effect into social media. You know, again, it's us. It's not the tool, right? So if I go on dating apps and don't get like all the likes and all the things and all the fucking hot women for all these things, then I'm like, this is this the only tier of woman I can attract? For instance, it's all because that's the social feedback. So I can either accept that as true and go, no, there's a whole bunch of other reasons. You know, you've just gone on a couple of different dates with very attractive, intelligent women. We'll talk about them in the next few episodes. But you know, so that's not entirely true. But the social feedback is X, Y, and Z. You know, and that's sort of what you're talking about as well. Like when we switch off the game, are the boys still there? Like,
right.
you in your particular case, that they're within close proximity, so you can still validate that when you see them at the gym the next day or whatever. Now, not everybody has that, and so this is where it comes back to you, Misfits, and like how are you going to gauge your investment into these kinds of channels when we're specifically talking about like online dating? Does it work? Yes, no, maybe so, right? Because if you're dating, it's ultimately I assume, to have some sort of relationship, whether it's short-term, long-term, or whatever, and that means physically meeting in person. So while apps, the barrier to entry is ground level, you can be anyone you want, you can say anything you want, you can do anything you want. It's quick, it's easy, it's accessible, it's private, you know, great. But it's what's your intent and what's the outcome that you expect?
Awareness. Just stronger awareness. I really, it's same thing as in real life relationship. You would hope that by, you know, a certain age, you have that foundation laid, that it's like, okay, at some point I'm going to have to assess myself, and I'm going to have to assess the way that this is working for me. Just do that work, Misfits. Now, to wrap this up, final fact that I thought was interesting, and it kind of irritated me, but people with anxious attachment styles may have a stronger inclination to engage in online relationships, seeking constant validation through frequent digital communication, while avoidant individuals might prefer they maintain emotional distance, according to the research in a personal relationship study done online. Okay, now the thing that pissed me off is I have an anxious attachment style, and I also, Misfits, do seek heavy validation. So I saw this and immediately went, wow, that's so fucking wrong. It's not, though. It's
right.
It's really not. And the reason that I struggled with it is because of how true it is. You know what I mean? And I see that in my children. I see that in myself. I see that in some of my friends that are also, I would say, higher anxiety level. And it's one thing that I just wanted to leave the Misfits with, is that I think that anxiousness, that validation that you're seeking, has a ton to do with the internal dialogue that Chris and I have spoken on a little bit in this episode. And, you know, as much as we're talking about online relationships, I think one of the things that we miss when anybody is talking about any sort of relationship is the relationship you have with yourself. And I truly hope that if anything out of this episode, it grants you kind of, again, that permission that we talk about to look at things, you know, look at the relationship, look at the online interactions you're having, look at the things that you're doing or seeking for validation and why you're doing those things. shit, it might make it a little bit easier to find a partner that understands you if you understand yourself. And that's all I got.
It's the Jerry Springer moment. There you go. It's all tied up. What are your thoughts, Misfits? Let us know in the comments. If you met someone, married someone, dated someone, what's been your experience online? But with friends as well as with relationships. I think it's interesting. I think let us know what you thought of the stats, because I thought the stats were particularly interesting. They sort of pull back the curtain on this, on the high gloss that is dating apps, and it doesn't exactly play out. Yeah, it doesn't exactly play out.
The dating apps will say 100% guarantee that you'll find a partner in fucking
everyone is hooking up all the time, everywhere, right now.
We have 7 million billion users. It's like, yeah, in the lifetime of the app, you have. But God, yeah, okay.
Anyway, good chat. That wraps up episode 62. B, episode 63. Do you know what's coming up next?
Misfits, you're going to be disappointed. I actually do, only because we've talked about this episode, and Chris has another motherfucking story that he will not tell me until we get to the episode. So this is going to have to do with sex work. That is the episode that's coming up. Yeah, and we'll see what Chris's juicy story is.
Right. What did we? I should probably take a drink, because I'm trying to remember what we did last week. What was that last week's episode? Episode 61.
Can
you be happy and successful?
Yes.
Right. That was a good chat. Was there anything in particular that you got out of that? Because I thought that was actually quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I walked away from that conversation and I wrote in my journal for probably a good hour, and really fleshed out for myself if I'm happy. I know it sounds like such a ridiculous, right? It really was like, and just to put it on paper and say, are you happy? And then kind of what I did was I listed out the things that I'm grateful for, the things that I get excited for, and the things that I'm kind of anxious to come. And looked at those 3 columns, and then I leveraged against them the things that I'm doing for each of those things. And
nice.
Do those things, do the actions I'm taking, do they make me happy? And I think I am.
It's a good place to start. So check that out, Misfits, if you haven't. Like, that's episode 61 from last week. Like, can you be happy first and successful? Not be happy because you're successful, but can you be happy as an individual first and then be successful?
Yes.
But getting on to next week, I'll give you a taster. So next week's episode is like, again, my dating life is like a third of this fucking podcast, I swear to God. Went on a date with a pretty girl who then later confessed that she had been doing sex work for the last couple of years. And so we're going to have a discussion about that, about the true cost of sex work. And she gave me a real insight into sort of her world and experience and view of men because of it. So the reason I flagged it to Broedy sort of early was because I think it's a really, really interesting discussion. There's a lot of talk about the effect of porn on young boys and all that sort of stuff, but seldom is there a discussion about the actual sex workers and their costs, their like relationship, emotional, psychological costs, and their impact.
They must enjoy it. It's just the greatest. Like, they just get to have sex all
day.
The
worst. or the worst, just slut shame them and like, oh, you're getting paid for whatever. Anyone could do it. That whole sort of thing. So we're going to talk about that, like in a hopefully in a non expose clickbait fucking way, but in like, if OnlyFans, the barrier to entry to OnlyFans is as low as any other social platform, what's a long-term cost for young girls or women getting into this kind of work? So we're going to discuss it, only because you'll hear all about the date later. You hear about the date next week. So that's what's coming up. Episode 63. Today's been a good chat on online dating. I could probably talk about this for another week. But Wrap it up. So again, this is a terrible outro. So Misfits, again, every week, you know where to find us. You can find us here on YouTube. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify. You can find us at promisfitspodcast.com. We've got t-shirts back in stock. So you can get your limited edition Professional Misfits cereal box t-shirts at promisfitspodcast.com. Thanks again to IGU for sponsoring season 6. In the meantime, I've been Chris.
I've been Broedy.
And you stay classy, Misfits. Hopefully Broedy doesn't get shot by next week. And we'll see you on the next one.